Thanks, Joy. Thanks to all of you, my brother priests and principals and RECs, my chief collaborators in the great task of evangelising and educating our children. Thank you for your involvement throughout today, not just this afternoon. And my thanks to Professors Kevin Watson and Gerard O'Shea from UNDA for their contribution. Mr Greg Whitby and his team for organising us, and those who've joined us today from the independent Catholic schools too. Two men dressed all in white attend the throne of God. They're not the two that St Luke told us gave the holy women trauma counselling on Easter morning, or the two that we heard on Sunday gave the apostles grief counselling on Ascension Day. No, they are two popes at whose recent canonisation I was privileged to concelebrate with two other popes, our current Pope Francis and Pope Emeritus Benedict, 800 or so bishops and 1 million or more of the faithful. They streamed into Rome as if into the heavenly Jerusalem, to rejoice that the two most famous Catholic leaders of the 20th century had joined the heavenly court and are now interceding for the Church. And you can catch my blog on the canonisation if you haven't already and are interested. But these are some of my holiday snaps. And you'll see some of our young teachers who from Blacktown, I think, who I met while I was there. Our two new Pope Saints have been called the bookends of the Second Vatican Council, because one was its initiator and the other its great interpreter. Today, I'd like to suggest that they and their council have much to say to Catholic education in the Diocese of Parramatta at this exciting time of implementing faith in our future and responding to the RE review. Good Pope John's spiritual autobiography, The Journal of a Soul, reveals his great holiness. As Pope, he asked a young boy what he was going to do when he grew up. The boy said he was either going to be a policeman or a pope. Aim high and be a policeman, John said. They'll take anyone as pope, just look at me. I'm not sure whether those were the only two careers he thought of as a little boy. But already by adolescence, he exhibited a deep desire to know God and to come closer to him in Christ. He adopted certain spiritual habits, such as praying for 15 minutes when he woke up in the morning, followed by spiritual reading and meditation. In due course, he added daily Mass and the Divine Office. Each week, he'd go to confession and fast on Friday and Saturday. From the look at him, he didn't fast too hard. Each month, he'd ask a trusted friend to observe him and point out his faults. Each year he'd go on retreat, and so on. A few of us, I suspect, are in quite so helpful a rhythm of prayer, and even fewer of us are humble enough to ask that our faults be regularly identified, though many of you have spouses just for that. But young Johnny started these good practices while he was still a schoolboy. And that made it easier for him to be prayerful as a busy adult. Not praying became as unthinkable for him as not brushing his teeth. As educators know, what you start at school can set you up for life. John Paul the Great was no spiritual slouch either. As Pope, he'd pray before the Blessed Sacrament for up to 90 minutes before saying Mass in the morning. On returning home from one of his arduous international journeys, his minders took him straight to his bedroom, only to find the bed untouched the next morning. He had spent the entire night on his knees in prayer. When Parkinson's disease confined him to his bed where his minders couldn't, John Paul asked that the Blessed Sacrament be reserved in his room so he could be close to his beloved. Once again, there's ample evidence that this intense spiritual life began in his school days. As the Jesuits say, get them by 7 and you've got them for life. Well, God may or may not be calling all of us or all our children to be such spiritual superheroes. So there's every reason to aspire to and even to expect saints from our Catholic education system in Parramatta Diocese. Indeed, the Second Vatican Council suggested that God is calling every one of us to sanctity. The Council's revolutionary idea was that personal holiness is not the preserve of the clergy, religious, and a few lay eccentrics renowned for their strange ascetic practices. Nor is holiness the icing on the cake, as if Christian life were living a middling good, middling bad sort of a life and hoping, after a long purgatory, to just scrape into the back rows of heaven just before closing time. No, said the Council and its 2 popes, personal holiness is foundational to any Catholic life, let alone for those who lead and form others, such as priests, principals and RECs. John Paul II commented that vital to a Catholic school's identity is the witness of the adults working there. Transmission of religious knowledge is necessary but not sufficient. Children need the teacher's own example and passion for the faith. Moreover, he pointed out, holiness is the touchstone of all sound pastoral planning, such as we've been engaging in the Parramatta Diocese of late. We must not settle, he said, for a life of mediocrity, marked by a minimalist ethic and a shallow religiosity. No plan based on that would be worthy of our high calling. Concepts such as love, gift, reciprocity and communion are fundamental to Catholic education and part of an educational ideal which moves educators to be credible witnesses in the eyes of young people. And there's the rub. Many leaders and staff in Catholic education are comfortable enough with having high ideals for our students. What loving adult doesn't want the best for their young people? But when we say we expect our leaders and our staff to be making progress towards sanctity, well, then we can start to shift around a bit in our chairs. We can feel a bit like the disciples in the gospel passage we began our prayer with today, who rather than being excited by the miraculous haul of fish, tried to send their divine provocateur away. Earlier this year, I offered you a text to goad your thinking about these things. It suggested we must all become more truly intentional in our discipleship and more upfront about it. Around the same time, Pope Francis made the very same point when he called us to be missionary disciples of gospel joy. Some of you have told me you found the book a little confronting. I'm very pleased to hear that. When people tell me they read the gospel and they can just give it a tick, they've done that, I think, well, they haven't heard it. It should confront us, even if it also consoles us. But it might seem to some a bit much to be asking ordinary people coming from very different backgrounds and spiritual levels, very busy with many responsibilities, to be so intentional, so missionary, so out there and intense about their faith. Well, what's the alternative? That we say credible witness matters, that we recognise that savvy young people have inbuilt phony detectors and won't believe our religious talk if we don't live it and breathe it ourselves, but that we just let things slide and hope for the best. The fact is, many supposedly Catholic institutions around the world today have St Maud's or the like on a sign out the front, a few religious symbols inside, here and there, some fine-sounding mission statements, and some humanly very good activities going on. But their Catholic soul has departed. Can we be happy being a hybrid between the state school down the street and the posh private non-denominational school up on the hill? A bit more spiritual than the one down the street and a bit cheaper than the one on the hill, but without the Catholic mission and identity. No. The fact is, if our discipleship is not intentional, not missionary, it is not discipleship. Which brings me to part 3, and those of you that are wondering how long this guy's going to carry on for. There's 5 parts. Next year, we'll celebrate the Golden Jubilee of the Second Vatican Council's document on Catholic education, Gravissimum Educationis, a document begun but not complete before John XXIII died. He had taught that the purpose of Christian education is to enable students to breathe in a Catholic atmosphere that more and more permeates their hearts, strengthens their wills, and sets them up for life as children of the Church. The Council document cited the thought of John XXIII and that of his apostolic namesaint when it aspired to the Catholic school being a place where the young learn to adore the Father in spirit and in truth. St. John Paul II had much longer as Pope, and so more opportunity to write about education, and in fact about just about everything else. Taking up themes from John XXIII and the Council document, he stated that the biggest challenge for Catholic schools was to enculturate children to wonder, to have confidence that they can come to know the truth of things, and to want to apply this in a life of service to God and humanity. In his theory of education, truth and freedom were inextricably linked. Schools can be therapy for a culture damaged by harmful relativism and radical autonomy, by teaching the young to apply their freedom to living the demands of the true and the good and the beautiful. Without such a commitment to truth, freedom, justice, and human dignity are all in danger, he thought. For this reason, the comprehensive vision of life presented by the Catholic school is a liberating rather than restricting force. For Catholics, of course, truth is not just an abstract concept. It is first and foremost a person, Jesus Christ, the way, the truth, and the life. On one occasion in Bologna, John Paul II shared a platform with Bob Dylan. You probably think I'm going to give you another record from Greg Whitby's collection, as I did at the Education Mass. Well, after Dylan sang a couple of songs, he handed the microphone to the Pope. Happily, John Paul resisted the temptation to sing a Polish pop song. Instead, he asked the great gathering of youth there, "How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man?" And then he answered, "There is one road, and Jesus Christ is the road, the way." Gerard O'Shea has focused our minds very helpfully this morning on Trinitarian Christocentrism. And I know you're going to go home and use that, just drop that into conversation every so often, especially conversations you want to stop. And if that one doesn't work, you could try Mr. Goggi and Mrs. Goggi. Trinitarian Christocentrism is, as Gerardo explained to us, theospeak, for our lives being centred on Jesus Christ, who reveals the Father to us in the communion of the Holy Spirit. For John Paul, the Catholic school represented a unique meeting place between young people and Christ, and the opportunity to develop that personal relationship with God and to discover that all things have their deepest meaning in the person and teaching of Jesus Christ. Christocentrism. That is why, to quote that Pope, prayer and the liturgy, especially the sacraments of the Eucharist and penance, should mark the rhythm of the Catholic school's life. With our two new Pope saints, I encourage you and your staff to take whatever opportunities you can to further develop your own relationship with Christ, along with that of your young ones, so that we really walk our talk. And I'll come back to that at the end. After a long day's work and prayer, Pope John the 23rd used to walk his talk by escaping from the Vatican, sometimes late at night, and going for walks in the streets amongst the ordinary people. This gained him the nickname amongst the Romans of Johnny Walker. Well, where have we come in Catholic education since the two Pope saints and their council? A few weeks ago, the Vatican published another document on Catholic education entitled Educating Today and Tomorrow, Renewing a Passion. It's a preparatory document for the upcoming celebrations of the 50 years since Gravissimum Educationis. And it reprises that conciliar text and the 8 major documents on Catholic education that have appeared since then, including one that appeared late last year. So our excellent RE review is already 2 documents behind the literature review, and Gerard assures me he's already working on updating it. We're always on the cutting edge here in Parramatta. Well, that brand new document recalls the theological and spiritual vision of all those texts since Vatican II and including Vatican II, reviews our changing social and educational context, and asks what kind of Catholic schools do we need for the 21st century, and then articulates some aspirations for them. At the heart of Catholic education, there is always Jesus Christ, the document says. Everything that happens in Catholic schools should lead to an encounter with the living Christ. To meet the great educational challenges on the near horizon, we must keep alive the memory of God made flesh in the history of mankind, in our history. Catholic schools are places of testimony and acceptance, where faith and spiritual accompaniment can be provided to young people, places where the transmission of knowledge is key, but as part of an integral education that includes religious formation, that helps young people realise the beauty of faith in Jesus Christ and of religious freedom in a multi-religious universe. And if this is to happen, Catholic educators will have to be credible witnesses. The document is aware of the challenges of our contemporary educational scene, our secularising and individualistic culture, the pressures of technocracy and economy, the woundedness of many of our children and their disconnect from other aspects of church life, the challenges of limited resources, exaggerated and ever-increasing and ever-changing expectations of education, and so on. I felt as I was reading it that our principals and RECs in Parramatta could have written that whole section about what are our challenges right now. And I have to admit, not all Vatican documents seem like they could have been written by us. If we are to renew our passion for Catholic education so that our schools are oases of evangelical hope and love for truth, then they'll need spiritual vision and good interpersonal relationships. The how of teaching, the document suggests, the how of teaching and learning will be as important as the what. The relationship that is pedagogy will have to be consciously examined and developed. Learners will be central, and schools will collaborate and contend with all that is learnt outside the school. A bishop, recalling John Paul II's amazing memory for names and faces, told of returning to Rome after some years and after having put on a certain amount of bulk. "Is your diocese growing?" Pope John Paul inquired. And the hefty prelate assured him that it was indeed expanding. "So is the bishop," said John Paul, with a twinkle in his eye. Now, before you ask if it was me, let me assure you it was an American bishop. Pope John Paul did tease me on at least 2 occasions I can recall, but it wasn't about my girth. Unsurprisingly, the new Vatican document has a bit to say about bishops, fat or thin, and their relationship to schools. Particular attention, the document says, must be devoted to the selection and formation of school principals, so that they will be not merely bosses, but the pastoral eyes and hands and voice of the bishop in the school. Accepting co-responsibility for a shared and living mission, and capable of providing teachers with the mutual encouragement and assistance they need. Teacher training must itself be seen as a lifelong project with an evangelical identity. The document argues that we must not resign ourselves to having a parallel population of teachers in our Catholic schools, those committed to the mission on the one hand and the others. What is needed instead is unity among the teachers, it says, who together are willing to embrace and share a specific evangelical identity, as well as a consistent lifestyle. The document concludes with a sage warning that amidst all the targets and league tables in contemporary education, we must not lose sight of the fact that much of what we do has invisible effects, or effects only obvious in the long term, and so not well captured by these measures. Nor should we forget that Catholic education is only one part of a person's formation across the lifespan. Which brings me then to part 5. In our Gospel today, we heard Jesus instruct the first Pope Saint to put out into the deep, whereupon Peter paid out his nets and drew in a great catch. St. John Paul II used this very text at the turn of the new millennium to charge the Church with the new evangelisation. I also cited this very text in the introduction to Faith in Our Future, calling upon the faithful of our diocese to engage with energy, dedication and great trust in the Lord in hauling in his fish. Many factors make it vital that we grow our faith and grow our faithful today. Our plan calls us to deepen our relationship with Christ in word and sacrament, to reach out especially to those with no spiritual home, and to identify ever more closely with our local Catholic community, and that community of communities that is the Church Universal. It calls the Catholics of Western Sydney to mature, intentional, missionary discipleship. And it looks to our schools to play their part in this great mission. I won't rehearse today all the great ideas, the many ideas in the pastoral plan, many of which bear upon our schools. I think it's a great tribute to our people, including many of you, who took part in the consultation process, who brought forth those ideas, whether at parish meetings or writing letters to us or the internet or all the other ways they connected. We all know St. John the 23rd's famous answer to a journalist who asked innocently, "How many people work in the Vatican?" "About half," His Holiness replied. Well, I'm convinced that the average is higher in our CEO and schools, and so I know that I can trust that already you'll be working with our parish communities and agencies in looking at what the pastoral plan says to you and how it might inspire new things or doing old things in new and better ways. One initiative heralded in the plan was the then yet to be reported review of religious education in our schools, conducted with the University of Notre Dame, Australia. Since then, we have received that completed review, as you heard today. A report of great weight, both intellectually and physically. I thank Professor Margie Ma, the Dean of Education at UNDA, Associate Professor Kevin Watson, the Director of Research who oversaw the project from the beginning, and begged us all to read the whole thing. It's about that thick. So it might take you till the weekend to get through it, but I tell you there's a lot of good stuff in there, interesting things. Associate Professor Gerard Shea for his literature review and for evaluating, sharing our story, and along with his colleague Edward Waters for the analysis of the raw data. Anyone else I haven't thanked, thank you for that great project. I congratulate them on a prodigious and insightful report. This review helps us to know where we've come from in RE, where we are now and where we might go in the future. It sets us up well to respond even better to the conciliar and post-conciliar documents and to the perceived needs of the faithful of Parramatta, who with their clergy contributed so generously to our pastoral planning process. Kevin's already taken us through the recommendations, and you've also got them in your pre-reading. And I'm pleased today formally to adopt the 11 recommendations. They will be stepping stones on our path to making Catholic schooling in our diocese even more clearly the missionary project it is called to be. Our religious education curriculum, Sharing Our Story, with its shared Christian praxis methodology, is now more than 2 decades old. The last time it was thoroughly reviewed was in 1995, with some modifications made in 1999. The present review takes stock of how it has gone, our present catechetical context, and the aspirations of the Church today. I was especially helped by Gerard's insightful analysis of shared Christian praxis. It acknowledges its strengths, such as its emphasis on forming, informing and transforming students as they grow in Christian discipleship, the recognition that there are certain core truths and the need to support faith communities and families. It also identified some shortcomings by 2014 standards, including a tendency to make the student the arbiter of what is true based on personal preferences, which is hardly appropriate with respect to scientific or historical truth, let alone revealed theological truth. The review also points out that sharing our story is too classroom-based and based on a particular view of what goes on in the classroom, failing sufficiently to immerse students in and prepare them for a post-school sacramental Christian life. More strategic focus needs to be given to helping students develop an ongoing commitment to Catholic faith and life. It's time, therefore, to build on the achievements of RE in this diocese while investigating new ways to help bring students into lifelong friendship with Jesus Christ. And that will require systematic explication of the Catholic faith based on the Catechism. But as the recent document highlighted, the how will be as important as the what. Every means of encouraging and deepening faith, rather than unsettling and deconstructing it, must be pursued. Meaningful participation by staff and students in the Church's rich sacramental, devotional and prayer life is basic here. And not just during the week, but on Sunday. International, national and local festivals of faith, pilgrimages and retreats, study of scripture, theology and church history, works of justice and compassion, all these are important. School links with families and parishes have to be strengthened. In addition to these matters highlighted by the review, there is the question of what to do in years 11 and 12. Today I commissioned Greg Whitby and his team to investigate an alternative to studies of religion, so that our students may complete their Catholic schooling with a board-approved course in Catholic studies that reinforces and capitalises on their RE experience across their school life and assists them towards further education as the other board-developed courses do. I don't underestimate the inertia we will face in trying to do this, but I'm convinced we can do better by our students in their final years before they enter a world that may well challenge their faith deeply. The RE Review also recognises the challenge of raising up new leaders for Catholic education. Teachers who are willing and able to serve our school communities and our system as leaders will need to be identified and supported in various ways. They are the DOSPs, principals, deputies and RECs of the future. I therefore ask Greg Whitby and his team to investigate what structural and formative changes would better support the religious leadership of our priests, principals and RECs, and assist in identifying and forming the next generation of leaders. To this end, I'm pleased to announce a new program that will be introduced in 2015 for teachers who begin a leadership role for the first time. We'll also be introducing a new program for religious education coordinators called Fides. I haven't been taking you through these, have I? Oh, well. I get carried away. Fides, there we go. Called Fides, which of course is Latin for faith. It's an acronym for forming intentional disciples in every school. It will build the capacity of our RECs to form intentional disciples and focus on collaborative leadership, mentoring and formation of staff. A high point of the Fides program will be a pilgrimage to the Holy Land and Rome. Specifics of this program will be available at the conclusion of today's meeting. From 2015, there will be a new Beginning Teachers Overnight Retreat, focusing on forming teachers as intentional disciples. I also ask principals to continue to ensure that there's at least one staff development day each year spent on the evangelisation and formation of our staff. As one-off experiences for beginning teachers and top-ups when you're moving into leadership are not enough. There's many years in between. We might usefully call these days evangelisation retreats to distinguish them from other PD days. The RE review highlights some deficiencies in, and the pastoral plan highlights some aspirations for, the school-parish relationship. And today I ask the Episcopal Vicar for Education and Formation, Father Chris D'Souza, to establish a working party to consider ways we might enrich that relationship between school and parish. In particular, we might review chaplaincy and other involvements of clergy in our schools, liturgical and other involvements of our schools in our parishes, and ways of knitting the communities and apostolates of the two more closely together. Later this year, Sherry Waddell will spend some time with us reflecting upon our challenges and opportunities. In August next year, we plan to bring out Michael Miller, the former Secretary of the Vatican Congregation for Catholic Education and new Archbishop of Vancouver, now Archbishop of Vancouver. He's a champion of Catholic education and he will be very engaging. I'd also like us to explore ways of connecting with the Global Convention on Catholic Education that will take place in Rome from the 18th to the 21st of November 2015, marking the 50th anniversary of Gravissimum Educationis. To conclude, when John the 23rd visited the Hospital of the Holy Spirit in Rome, he was introduced to the nun who ran the hospital. "Holy Father," she said, "I am the superior of the Holy Spirit." "You're very lucky," said the delighted Pope. "I'm only the Vicar of Christ." It's dangerous to let your bishop go and keep company with 4 popes. He may come back full of excitement about what those new saints have to say to Catholic education. But there you are. At a time when we could easily be demoralised by nightly news of past failures, we must redouble our determination to be better for the young people of Western Sydney. I'm convinced that our church can be, and that Catholic education has a crucial role to play here. We need all the enthusiasm that you can muster. We can take our 2 new Pope saints with their conciliar and post-conciliar documents. We can take our pastors and people with their new pastoral plan. We can take our own education leaders and staff with their new RE review, as well as the various initiatives I've announced this afternoon, as encouragements moving forward. What you do is absolutely crucial for the mission of the Church and for our young people. Thanks be to God for each one of you.
Bishop Anthony, this week is the week of prayer for Christian unity. How are we going to incorporate the ecumenical dimension, the unity of Christians, and interfaith relations in Catholic education? And secondly, I know that this is about our Catholic schools. What about our state schools?
On the first matter, I think it's certainly already the case, and I would expect in any new curriculum and new pedagogies going forward that we will be very conscious of issues of Christian unity and of interfaith. For one thing, because the kids in front of us are from all religions. They're not all Catholics. And even the ones we tag Catholic may well come from mixed marriages and complicated families where they're not all Catholic. So our teachers surely are very aware that the very group they're working with are of mixed religion. But also that, and we had the document last year on educating in intercultural dialogue, we've had a number of prompts from the church, including the one 3 weeks ago, to be aware of the great value of our religious freedom in a multi-religious universe. So I'd be very confident that our curriculum going forward will continue as it has till now, but in new ways to be respectful of, teaching people about the existence of, the beliefs of, the commonalities with the other great religions, and above all, obviously, with our Christian brothers and sisters. As for our state schools, well, that wasn't a focus of today, and perhaps we'll need to have a day of pastors and SRE coordinators or SRE teachers parallel to this, because I think they have some similar challenges, but also some very different ones. One that exercises my mind all the time is that we have very little presence in our secondary schools, state secondary schools. We're doing pretty well in our primary schools, but very little presence in our secondary schools. So we have some big challenges there that are different, as well as some parallel ones to those of our Catholic schools. But one great sign of hope there, I think, is the engagement of a growing number of our own senior secondary students in delivery of SRE in our state schools. And it was mentioned, I think, at one of our speakers about how teaching a thing, how helpful that can be to get you to think through what and really internalise and examine and take to heart some belief. Well, to challenge our young people to teach younger people the faith, I think we'll be doing great things for the young people who are the SRE teachers, as well as the kids in the schools.
Hi, Bishop. You mentioned that school-based discussion centres around lead tables an awful lot, but you also mentioned the invisible effects that teachers have. Would you like to expand a little bit on what you think those invisible effects are?
Sure. You'll find that it's in the last section of the document that came out just a few weeks ago, and it struck me as interesting how aware they were of these pressures at the moment of constant accountabilities and the My Schools of one version or another, and the thought that those are important, they're incentives, they help with comparisons, whatever, they give you benchmarks. But how do you measure how many saints a Catholic school has made? No, you could go by the number of canonised saints, in which case we're not doing too well in Parramatta yet, but we have only been a diocese for 26 years. But we know we celebrate All Saints each year because we know there are for everyone that's canonised, there's perhaps 1 million uncanonised. So who are they? Well, what are the measures out there that would measure that? There probably aren't measures short of canonisation. But That doesn't mean we say, well, therefore, we think there's no objective standard or there's no way we would know if we were succeeding. There are some things we can ask ourselves, like, do we think, and is there real evidence that we're making some progress in the connectedness of our young people with the rest of Catholic life? There would be some objective measures, but much of what you do is about a deep conversion of hearts, which may then display itself years later in the way they parent, or in what they do when they meet a crisis, how they respond when they suffer, breakdown of a relationship, a death. Those are things you're setting them up for, those really crucial moments. And those are not things that you can put out my school, even my Catholic school league tables. But they're absolutely crucial. So Christ makes this point at many points in the gospel about, the things that grow hidden in the night and you don't see them till the great harvest day at the end of time. These little seeds that unexpected can grow to great trees and so on. He's very conscious of the hidden work of grace in people's lives, which we seek to enable and to one way or another to fertilise, encourage, but it may not be till the last day that we'll see the effects of what we've done. We keep working at it, and where we can have some kind of objective measure of, is all that energy actually achieving anything? Well, we try and bring that to bear to help us focus, but we're also aware there's a bigger goal than the My School League tables.
I know the beauty and the benefits of the parish-based sacramental program. Sometimes it's where the parents themselves get more benefit than the students themselves. However, in our schools we have students who want to get baptised, make their reconciliation, confirmation, and yet their parents aren't interested. And so we're at a bit of a loss, and I think that some of the students kind of fall through the cracks. Yeah. And so I'm just wondering where we go with these kids.
Those are really good questions. I think some of that might be amongst the things this new working party on parish and school might look at. I do think that the family-based, what are the three words we use for the parish, the family and school, but anyway, it's supposed to really happen in the family and the rest is supporting them. Well, that depends hugely on where the families are at, how well that's going to work. In terms of your thought, there are kids in our schools that want to be baptised or want the rest of Christian initiation, and there's not much support coming from home. There might be permission, but not much more than that. I think if we're serious about our schools being centres of evangelisation and of or new evangelisation, we have to be open to every school being a kind of place for RCIC, a place for people who so love what they meet in the school that they want more. They want to be part of it. They want to actually become a Christian, become a Catholic. But you want them to find a parish community, because they're not going to be in your school forever. In fact, they'll only be in each school for 6 years, or a few of our schools for 12 years. And then, well, where are they? What's their connection with school, with church after that? And what about all the other parts of church that school can't be for them? So we need to also be initiating them into the faith, but also into a community of the faithful. And that's the kind of challenge that I think parish and school working better and better together could be addressing. At the moment, I think a few of our schools have conscious programs to bring kids in to the faith. Well, we've got 83 if we include our independent schools. What about 85 if we include the parent-owned ones? 86. I think there should be 86 conscious programs of initiating children into the Christian faith, because that should be a normal part of our life. They should just love what they see and want to join it. Now we're going there gradually by piloting it in a few places and seeing what we can learn so we can do it well. And that's, I think, a very smart approach to this. But the aspiration must be that those kids that you say end up being discouraged are actually encouraged and given every opportunity.
We have more time than I thought, so we've more questions. I think Carmen.
As a means of providing students with the opportunity to encounter Christ in their hearts, the Diocese of Townsville in Queensland introduced Christian meditation in all schools from preschool to year 12. Do you have any thoughts on this, and would you be open to a similar program in the Parramatta Diocese?
I don't know the program well, though I heard the late Bishop Putney speak about it quite often. And I have just recently, a few months ago, had a fellow who's a kind of leading practitioner of this and a professor in the University of New South Wales approach me wanting to see if he could introduce it into one of our hospitals here in the Parramatta Diocese for the staff, and I've given him every encouragement to do exactly that. So I think that we tried a very little thing in trying the Angelus. It's a few, 2 minutes or something a day. I think it's just one little taster of the different ways of praying and meditating that we have in our tradition, that we could be looking at how do we give kids lots of ways so that they'll find one that they really like themselves and will do, and that they'll know of others, so when they develop over the years going forward, they might be ready for some others. So I'm certainly open to exploring other ways of praying and meditating than the ones we already do. And my guess is across our schools we've already got quite a lot of different ways that people engage in prayer and meditation. Obviously, I want it to be Christian meditation, and that was a point that Bishop Putney used to make strongly too.
Thanks. Professor Watson and Professor O'Shea and Bishop Anthony, I want you to thank you for bringing those confronting issues to us today. I thought that was wonderful, about the RE, the religious education in our schools. In light of what you were saying, and with the advent of the national curriculum, what are your thoughts on a national religious education curriculum, or at a minimum a New South Wales curriculum?
It's a very good question. We have 28 regional dioceses and 6 non-regional ones. That makes 34 in Australia at the moment, and that means we have at least 34 different views of how you should do RE. Now, some have come together in one way or another, so there are programs that are shared between several, and some programs, one way or another, are shared between quite a number of dioceses. But it's an interesting thing that we can, as a country, agree on things like a constitution and what we should teach in every other subject, and a whole lot of our laws and policies. But with RE, it seems a huge battle. I really hope that will happen in my lifetime. It's an aspiration I have, because I think it's absurd that here in our own diocese, depending on what side of the street you're on, it could be Broken Bay on that side of the street or Sydney on that side of the street, and you change sides of the street and you might just miss Eucharist or Trinity or Grace or who knows what, because it's taught in year 2 over here and in year 10 over here. Well, surely we can get our act together so that people in the same city will not end up missing whole parts of the gospel, and in other ways. But I don't underestimate the challenge of this, because people like yourselves and even bishops can get quite passionate about religious education and their way of doing it and their ideas on the how and the what. And you end up with some interesting discussions about that when you're trying to have a single program. But I think the national curriculum, you're quite right to point to that, it's a goad to us at the moment. If we can do this in every other area of knowledge, every other discipline, even if RE is special in all sorts of ways, such as Gerard identified for us, it surely must be possible that we could, at least within the same city or the same state, and hopefully ultimately the same country, have more in common. There is now a national document that expresses the aspiration that we'll move towards the point of having some kind of national framework, even if we don't end up with the same curriculum. We'll have a framework so that, for instance, a kid that moved from Sydney to Melbourne wouldn't miss the Gospels because they're done in this year in this state and this year in this state. So there's some progress happening there. And I think what we're told about a spiralling approach would also be very helpful at ensuring that these are not things done in intensive blocks and never mentioned again. And so if you're sick or you go on holidays or you move across the street, you miss that altogether because you'll be coming back to the central things. That's me.